my name is Mason Bennett, and this is my speech on the complexities of video game violence. And here are my references. And I'd like to start today off with some audience participation. Raise your hand if you've ever played a violent video game before. Now, look around the classroom and look at your roommates and ask yourself the question, do you really think anyone in this room would ever try to hurt you? And it sounds kind of crazy, but there's a very popular notion, especially among the parents of people our age, that violent video games such as Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto can spur violence in those for playing games where killing and shooting and all this violence is very prevalent. And this is damaging not only to those who play the games, but also those who make them. Now, contrary to popular belief, research suggests that this really isn't the case. It doesn't correlate to real-life violent behavior, as many studies have found that other factors such as family positions or social influences can have a much greater impact. And now, I've grown up in a family where violent video games are around all the time. I grew up playing them. I played them with my brother. My dad played Doom, which is one of the first that really spurred this argument. But even for me, certain games were off limits. Games like Friday the 13th were off limits until I was older because the violence in them was just so excessive. And then there were others like Grand Theft Auto that I couldn't play simply because of the media representation of that game and what people said about it online. Now, in today's speech, I'd like to talk about the research that was put behind these claims and largely disproving it. I'd like to talk about statistics that show the weak correlation between these two situations, and talk about what we can do to prevent it and do better in the future. Now, a study by Dr. Christopher Ferguson, psychology professor at Texas A&M International University, showed that many of the studies that talk about media violence rely on measures that don't really accurately depict if it is a cause of real-life violence, but rather a small influence on an individual whose aggression can be explained by those other factors that we mentioned before. He said, and I quote, exposure to family violence and innate violence motivation play a much greater role. And many of these beliefs started way back in the 1970s after the release of a game called Death Race, that people believed that the primitive graphics of depicting innocent civilians being run over by a car, and this spurred again in the 90s with the release of the first-person shooter video games, which much has changed in the decades since then, and the standards we follow need to be reevaluated. But just like the general social belief behind these games causing violent acts, the stats also used to back this up are also outdated. In an official study done by the Department of Justice, it shows that the number of youth arrests for violent crimes have declined greatly since the 1990s, despite video game sales rising. In 1994, there was a reported 1.05 million youth arrests in the United States, and now in 2021, this was reported 125,000. These numbers have continued to go down every year to today, despite the soaring increase of video game sales over the last 2 decades. In a chart created by the World Economic Forum, it shows that gaming revenue has increased by over $100 billion a year since the 1990s. Now that we've moved past that, I'd like to talk about what we can do better in the psychological aspects of it. Now, while research has shown that a subset of youths may become more aggressive after playing violent video games, it is not the video games themselves that cause this aggressive behavior. It's been found that a combination of individual personality traits are more likely to make someone think aggressively after playing a game rather than the game itself. In a study done by two psychologists, Dr. Patrick Markey and Dr. Charlotte Markey, those who were identified as having high neuroticism, disagreeableness, and low conscientiousness after playing violent video games all responded with aggressiveness, while those who didn't previously show these personality traits had no effect at all. The solution to this problem is not to ban these video games or to change the content of said games, but to place more restrictions on who can access them. A lot of the responsibility of this falls to the parents and guardians of these young kids and teens who need to educate themselves properly on screen time regulations and reading the content warnings that are present on products like this to appropriately gauge if it is suitable for their children, rather than simply relying on outdated statistics and media coverage. The general belief that video games can cause real-life violence was based in a time where there was little to no factual information on the topic, and everything was spread by word of mouth. Since then, hundreds of hours of research, if not thousands, and many trials have been done to disprove this. In conclusion, the myth that video game violence directly causes real-life violence is outdated and unsupported. By focusing on the real factors contributing to aggression in youth, such as individual disposition and family environment troubles, we can foster a better understanding of this issue and work towards practical solutions that address the root causes of violence in today's society. Now that we're coming to the end of my presentation, I'd like you to take a moment to consider how your own views on video game violence have affected your life. Start a conversation with those around you. See how your friends have been affected by this and whether they have seen any of this violence firsthand. Then consider what steps you can take to contribute to this discourse, from advocating for new policies, promoting media literacy, or supporting different mental health institutions. We all have the power to make a difference. And if you'd like to learn more about this topic, I highly suggest checking out this book by Dr. Markey and Dr. Ferguson. It gave me a lot of valuable information as well. But from now on, with that said, let's do better. Let's choose understanding over assumption. Let's choose conversation over fear. And let's choose kindness over panic as we navigate the complex issue of violence in youth. Together, we can build a safer, more understanding community. Thank you.